If you own one of these Kawasaki KX85s or KX100s, you know how much abuse these clutches take. Now, if you're not quite sure if your clutch is slipping or not, one thing you can do is when you're cruising along, you can shift the bike into high gear, open the throttle all the way up, and if the RPM comes up but the bike speed doesn't increase, then chances are your clutch plates are slipping and you want to get that clutch pack replaced. Now, anytime you do this test, you always want to make sure that you have the correct free plate at your clutch perch. Now again, this is going to be a similar process for the KX85s and KX100s, but there might be some minor differences throughout the years, so make sure you reference your model-specific service manual for more information and specs. To do this job, we're using a drain pan, ratio ride, a funnel. We've got our safety glasses, rags, rubber gloves, and then some common hand tools, including a digital caliper, some feeler gauges, and an inch-pound torque wrench. For parts, we have a lot of different options on our website. We went with the Tusk clutch kit with heavy-duty springs. We've got our clutch cover gasket, an oil change kit, and some contact cleaner. All right, guys, we've got our bike washed off. You want it as clean as possible, and then anytime you're replacing these clutch plates, you want to have some fresh transmission oil in there. So we're going to go ahead and remove our drain plug. We're also going to remove our oil filler cap. That way we don't forget to put oil back in. Then we can install a new crush washer on our drain plug and reinstall it. All right, now this brake pedal's in the way. If you want, you can separate your brake pads, push this down and get something to hold this brake pedal down, or you can just remove this stuff out of your way. So what I'm gonna do is loosen up the master cylinder, and then that's gonna take the tension off of that spring, so then we can remove that pivot bolt. So you can see this bolt that hasn't been greased, it's kind of stuck in there. So we're gonna clean that out and re-grease it a little bit later. But for now, we can just disconnect this spring and set the lever aside. Now at the clutch perch, we're going to loosen up our adjustment and disconnect our cable. One thing I want to point out is you can change the engagement point of your actuator arm. So if yours looks very far off from what we have, then you might need to make some adjustments. So if you go perpendicular to that clutch cover mating surface and then go 15 degrees back, that's where this thing is supposed to stop. If it's way off, then obviously you need to adjust it. We'll show you how to do that once we get in here, but we're gonna go ahead and remove the clutch cover by removing these bolts in a crisscross pattern. Then to pull this off, I'm just rotating that arm a little bit back and we'll rock the cover off. Now we're going to remove the pressure plate bolts in a crisscross pattern, and we're going to do it in a couple different steps. If you can't break these loose real easy, you can remove the flywheel cover and use a flywheel holding tool while you break these loose. But for us, we're just going to go quick with the T-handle to break them all loose. So now we're going to remove the pressure plate and that lifter rod. And as I pull this off, that's that washer or shim that I'm talking about right there. Now when I pulled the pressure plate, it pulled one of the friction discs. Right on the side of the basket, there's these two holes. I'm just putting my fingers in there to pull the rest of the clutch pack out. I'm gonna lay it all out in order. If you can't get your fingers in there, you could just use a couple of picks with a 90-degree bend to help pull all those out. And one more thing I want to point out is these two dowel pins. Just make sure they are still there. Typically these ones aren't going to pop out, but just keep an eye out for them. From here, we're going to get all our parts cleaned up. So if you have any gasket material left on the sealing surface, you want to scrape that off. And then we're going to use contact cleaner and a rag to clean that surface. If you have any friction material from those friction discs inside the clutch, you may need to remove your drain plug and use some contact cleaner to get that all sprayed out of there. Once everything's clean, you want to go ahead and inspect it. So for the clutch basket, the main thing we're looking for here is wear on the clutch fingers. If there's deep grooves on that, or on this clutch hub. If you look in there where the steel plates ride, if you've got deep grooves in either one of those, then you want to replace those parts. Now a good way to check this is to install a clutch disc and slide it back and forth. If it catches on the notches, then you know you've worn too far. And same thing with that inner hub, you can take one of those steel plates, slide it back and forth, and again, if it's catching, you know it's bad. So as you can see, we do have a little bit of wear on the clutch hub and our clutch basket, but after a close inspection, the plates are still running smooth enough that we're going to run one more clutch pack through there before replacing them. But if you want the best performance out of your clutch, maybe you're doing some serious racing, then you'd want to go ahead and replace these parts. On the clutch hub, you also want to look towards the back. You have that machined surface. You want to make sure that's nice and smooth. If you have deep grooves or any damage to it, again, make sure it gets replaced. Now for the pressure plate, again, you want to check that machined surface, make sure it's not damaged, and you also want to check this bearing. If it feels notchy, you'll definitely want to get it replaced, and ours actually doesn't feel that good, so we're going to replace that. Now for the clutch cover, we're going to look at the actuating arm right where it engages this pull rod, and if these corners are rounded off, then we're going to want to replace that. If you need to make adjustments, if you remove these shims, it's going to move this actuating arm forward. If you add shims, it's going to move the actuating arm back. Now, if you're not sure if your clutch plates are worn out, you can always take a measurement. So the minimum spec on this is 2.7 millimeters. We're at 2.9, so we're within spec with these, but if you look at the steel plates, you can see a lot of discoloration and bluing on these, and we know these are warped. Now you can put these on a surface plate and use a feeler gauge under them, but if you can see discoloration, then you're going to want to get the whole clutch pack replaced. The next measurement we're going to take is on the clutch springs. Now the minimum is 34 millimeters. You want to make sure you're just barely bringing the caliper up to the ends of the spring. You don't want to compress it. And we're right at the limit, maybe just barely under. We already have those new springs, so we're definitely going to get them installed. Now to get this bearing replaced, all we're doing is using a bearing driver on that inner race. We'll hit it out and then use a bearing driver on this outer race. If you don't have a bearing driver, you can always just use sockets and a hammer. And you know, these aren't very tight. It should go in and out pretty easy. Before we go together, we're going to pour some oil, some of that transmission oil, onto our friction discs. So I just cut these out of the package. I'm going to use part of that package to help soak these in oil. All right, from here, we're going to start assembly with a friction disc, and we'll follow that with a steel. Now on the steels, you'll notice that you feel one sharp edge and the other side is rounded. Doesn't matter what way that goes, but just keep them facing all the same direction. Now for the pressure plate, we have oil on the new bearing. We'll install this push rod through it along with our shim. We have a little bit of lube on the push rod, and we'll set this into place. Then we can install the 4 new springs and the bolts, and we're going to torque these again in a crisscross pattern to 82 inch-pounds. Now we're going to install our new clutch cover gasket. I put some grease on ours just to help keep it in place. Now to install the clutch cover, we're just going to have this actuating arm facing the rear of the bike, and make sure you engage that pull rod with it. And then those 2 dowel pins that we pointed out earlier, make sure they line up. Now to do this, I'm obviously going to have to move that Kickstarter out just a little bit. And then if this actuating arm engages at that 15-degree angle like we were talking about, then you know you're good, and you can install the clutch cover bolts. From here, we're going to reinstall our brake pedal and then fill the transmission up with oil. Now, the oil spec for 01 to 03 KX100s is 650 milliliters, and the 2004 and newer 100s will take 700 milliliters. Now we're going to install the filler plug, and we're going to reconnect our clutch cable. Then from here, this is a good time to take advantage of your cable being off and lube it up, and then we'll reconnect it to our perch and adjust it. So the clearance on ours is 2 to 3 millimeters. Once you've topped off the transmission fluid, you're ready to go ride. And that's it for the Kawasaki KX85 and KX100 clutch replacement. If you need any parts for this job, be sure to check out our website. We have a lot of different options on there. And if you want to see more helpful content like this, subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.